What's up? It's Andrea. Today, we dissect a sketchy legal system. We review some basic human rights, and we ask the question, do they even have toasters in the 24th century? All that and more coming up.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we're breaking down Season 2, Episode 9, The Measure of a Man. This episode was written by a woman, Melinda Snodgrass, and directed by Robert Scherer, and the star date is 42523.7. Jumping just right on in, Commander Bruce Maddox, a super gung-ho cybernetics expert and all-around asshole, wants to disassemble Data in order to learn more about his inner workings. Picard defends the android in court to establish his sentience. Commander Riker is ordered to argue the case for dismantling Data, pitting the captain against his first officer. What are your, opening thoughts on this episode?
Oh my gosh, Andrea. This episode is so good. So good. I can't even deal. I'm so excited we get to talk about this today. What about you?
You know what? I like this episode. I'm probably not as effusive about it as you are, but it is a really good episode. I think it's one of the stronger episodes of season 2. Something that I really love about this episode, and it doesn't have to do with the plot, I love the visuals. They're so good. When they're at the starbase, you can see the Enterprise floating just outside.
So cool.
Yes. And then it's the opposite. When you're in the observation lounge, you can see the starbase kind of spinning around. It's just those little moments were so cool and just incredible little reminders that oh yeah, there you are. It was super cool. As far as the storyline goes, I love the idea of arguing the case for Data's sentience and his not being property of Starfleet. That I feel like we're really touching on people being property, and Guinan even brings the case around for this is basically slavery. It's slavery if he is not free to make his own choices, then Data belongs to Starfleet. And don't we as humans have a history in our ugly past of treating others like this? And I was like, oh my God, what a incredibly nuanced way to kind of touch on slavery.
Yeah, a really important topic. And yeah. I love that also. And another thing that I just thought of right now is that oftentimes in movies and television, at least in American film and TV, whenever there's an AI, they always turn evil and try to kill us, right? That's kind of the theme, right? Is that we give robots the ability to think for themselves, and they use those thoughts to realize that they don't need us anymore and destroy us. In the case of Data, he's definitely an artificial intelligence, but at no point do you think he's going to turn bad and try to kill us. Although that is basically what lore specializes in.
Yes.
Data's not like that, right? He is just like any other kind of person who can make good choices or bad choices. And he's not the evil AI that's going to destroy us all. And so I really love this, just the premise of this episode of is Data man or machine? And just like you said, is he property? And so for and also I love Data. So for those reasons, I was just oh, this episode's so good.
Yeah. And I think that this episode too really highlights that Pulaski Maddox type of mentality where if you are different, then you are not as good as.
Then you are lesser.
Yes. And it's ridiculous. And I mean, this guy Maddox makes Pulaski look like Mother Teresa, for crying out loud. I mean, he refers
100%. I'm Pulaski's not that bad. After looking at Maddox, you're she's just a little rude.
Pulaski just sort of seems like a grandma who's set in her ways and not comfortable with new technology. And don't we all know somebody like that? Okay, but Maddox is and we'll get into it, but I mean, he's just on a whole other level. So, a couple little things. So this opening scene in this episode is when they're all playing poker. And this is the first time we ever see the crew sitting around, or the bridge officers at least, sitting around playing poker. And I love that this is a thread that is interwoven throughout all of the series, including the very last scene of the series finale. All good things.
Ooh, wow. I totally did not remember that.
Yes. So that was the final scene of Star Trek TNG, was they were all sitting around
poker.
Oh,
yeah. That's so cool. When I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is their first poker game, the infamous poker, because they keep playing poker as a way to kind of just socialize and hang out, and they have so many interesting conversations during their poker games and stuff. And it looks like it's the first time that Data was playing with the crew, because he was like, yes, I know everything about this game. Like, I totally know how to play. And they were saying, it's not just about the rules and regulations. Like, there's more to this game. And Data's just like, what do you mean there's more to this game? I know everything about this game. And then he totally loses with this incredible hand he has, which he should not have folded on, because Riker bluffed him. And that I also love that Data, can get bluffed, because he can recognize all these things, but he can't recognize a tell, which is just fun.
I thought that was so adorable to see Data sort of learning about Riker's poker face, and like he just gets owned by Riker. And you see Geordi and Pulaski and the others are like laughing that Data just got killed, by Riker's like, inferior hand of cards. And everybody's laughing, and Data's just kind of like looking around and taking it all in. I thought that was really cute. Something you just said, though, really triggered a thought in me. One of the very few times that we see the TNG like bridge characters just shooting the breeze is when they are playing poker. And that does allow them to like engage in the same activity and have all these great conversations.
And kind of like rib each other and kind of joke around and mess with each other. And Data actually ends up getting really good at poker.
Yeah, he becomes incredible. You know what I'd love to see is somebody cosplay Data with the little poker visor. That would be such a great cosplay. Well, this begs the question for me, what sort of activities do you do where you have a group of friends that you can all kind of shoot the breeze with? Like for me, it's rock climbing and surfing. Like when I'm surfing and I'm just sitting in the water waiting for waves, you end up just kind of shooting the shit with friends and like just kind of having random conversations. Is there anything like that for you?
Yeah, I don't really do anything, hence why I'm still single. But I used to, as you know, I used to rock climb for years, and I would probably put climbing in that list of things because, oftentimes I think with fondness, especially right now, while we're recording this, we're in the midst of COVID and lockdowns and stuff like that. And I often reminisce about like how great climbing was and how much I loved climbing. And then I have to stop myself and say, actually, no, like I liked climbing. Like I liked it okay. But really, it was everything you're talking about. It was the socializing. It was the being with friends and like encouraging one another, teasing one another, joking with one another, talking about whatever. Like the experience that's what was fun. Whenever I would climb by myself, that was super lame. So it was really like the whole environment, of climbing was great. And if you guys have not climbed before, when COVID's over, you need to try it because rock climbers are crazy people and they are just so much fun.
In the best sense, yeah. It's crazy good fun. Anyway, all right. So the Enterprise arrives at this new starbase and Picard is sitting in the lounge area having some tea. And I thought, number one, what is with Picard and the teeny tiny mugs? Every time he's drinking anything, it's like a doll cup.
Yeah,
it's
the most petite little cup. I was like, ooh, a new cup. Thanks, Star Trek.
Yes. And it's teeny. So if you viewers happen to want to be on the lookout, it's around the 3-minute mark. He's got this like demi-tasse, like espresso single shot. And he's like kind of cupping this mug as though it's like warming his hands, like a big steaming mug of Joe or something. I did not realize the classic glass Earl Grey mug that he uses.
Yeah.
Is tiny. And I didn't learn that until I found one online and bought it for myself and then realized it only holds like, a quarter cup of liquid. It's so tiny.
It's perfect for enough sips in a scene of an episode.
Yes.
That's really what you need it for.
But if you want a cup of tea, forget it. Just get a mug. Anyway, so this Captain Philippa Louvois looks like an old girlfriend of his.
And an old girlfriend and an old enemy. Which is so fun, right? Because when they meet each other, he's just like, wow, look at you. Oh my goodness, you look great. Do you know what I want to do? And you're like, oh my gosh, are they flirting? And she's just like, hit me in the teeth with the chair. I was like, oh, okay. And then he's like, after that, I was like, oh, wow. They have a really interesting relationship.
Well, my first thought was, wow, Picard's been taking a page out of Worf's like mating book, because he's like, let me just backhand you down the bridge. Hiding to you, my God. Anyway, so it turns out.
Oh, that took me a minute to get that one. That's funny.
It turns out that she is a JAG officer on this new starbase, and JAG stands for Judge Advocate General, which is the legal arm of the U.S. Navy. So she's out there saying like, I hope we can make some good new laws in the sector of space.
Their conversation quickly devolves. Yeah, maybe they had a little thing going on, but then she was a prosecutor against him in the Stargazer affair, which was his original command, his ship that was blown up, lost in space. They didn't know what happened to it. And so he felt like she had attacked him during that time because he's just like, yeah, you did your job, but you did it too well and all this stuff. And she's just like, it's about the law. And then you're like, ooh, this is getting really tense. Like all the pleasantries were dropped. All the smiles were gone. All the flirting was over. And then she ends with calling him really sexy. And you're like, oh, this is so weird. And then the Admiral comes over. It was the most awkward flirting. Well, no, we've seen some awkward flirting in season 1. It was just along the lines of all the regular awkward flirting.
Well, I don't think we have yet to see Picard flirt like a normal human being
and not be awkward. That's fair.
Not be weird. Yeah, because in The Naked Now, he does that thing with Beverly where he goes blah, 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 and he makes that super weird sexual sound.
Yeah. And then he gives her that really awkward wave when she leaves the bridge.
Yes.
I need you, Jean-Luc. And he's just like, not now, Beverly.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe Picard, all of his flirting is just a little bit awkward.
He doesn't quite know how to do the flirting thing until we meet Vash on Rise Up, but that's not for like a number of seasons.
We got some time for that.
We've got a little, he needs to sharpen his skills.
He needs to take some lessons from Riker.
Yeah.
But that's a conversation for another episode.
All right. So the Admiral says he wants to do a tour of the Enterprise, and he does. And so the Admiral brings this guy Maddox aboard, and he says Maddox is here to work on your android. See to it that is like taken care of.
Make it happen.
Number one, that was very much a like bum 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 kind of moment, but the sound effects that played immediately after that,
so good,
so crazy 80s,
so
like
so good. It was the 80s dramatic music.
Yeah.
When the bad guy's there and you don't know what's going to happen. It was so great.
That was like the 80s TV that I fucking love. Like that made me so happy to hear that sound effect. And Data's starting to look worried, like, so we learned that Maddox and Data have met before, and Maddox was in charge of evaluating Data for Starfleet Command.
Academy.
Yeah. Starfleet Academy. Thank you. And he was the only vote against Data's entrance to the Academy on the grounds that he's not a sentient being. So this sort of feels like almost like a two-parter, but part 1 was done off camera. So we're getting a little bit of resolution that we didn't actually know there was any like conflict there. But he says he's going to just disassemble Data and study him so he can create more Datas. What? I'm sorry. No, that's not a thing, right? What do you think?
It's so crazy because it's like, and I just kept waiting for somebody to be like, well, maybe I should just disassemble you to study you, right? Like I want to understand what human men look like. So I'm just going to cut you open, pull all your insides out, look at them. I'm going to draw them on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Just so I can learn. Like that's outrageous and ridiculous.
Well, yeah. And I think that number one, I could see the value of having like a Data on every starship. However, destroying the one Data you have to study that as a blueprint, no, that's a little too risky. And honestly, like if Maddox did make a point where he was like, look, if this were just like a ship's computer, I wanted to like disassemble it and study it, that would be one thing. But we are not talking about a ship's computer that doesn't have like consciousness and like self-awareness and understanding.
And it's not an individual that's walking and talking and hooking up with people and going on away missions.
And like making memories and stuff. Yeah, exactly. So Data very quickly understands that Maddox doesn't have enough information to like successfully create a positronic brain.
Which I love. I love that Data like interviews him, right? While they're sitting there in the observation lounge talking, Data's not just like, okay. And he's also not like, no way, which was my thought. Like, no way. He was just like, okay, well, how exactly would you do this? Well, what about this part? Okay, well, if you don't know how to do that, then you shouldn't do anything, because you won't be able to put me back together. Like he was very like, of course he's an android, but it was very logical and matter of fact of like, well, you don't yet have the skills. So I think it's ill-advised. And so no, like I'm not with that. And Maddox is just getting so frustrated because he just wants to be able to do what he wants to do. And he doesn't understand why he should have to explain himself or why he should have to prove he has any of these skills, why he should have to ensure Data safety. And when Picard's just like, you're not giving us answers. Your answers are so vague that it's not safe for Data because we want Data back in one piece on our ship. And he's just like, well, hoped it wouldn't come to this, but I'm transferring him over to my ship and I'm going to do it anyway.
Yes. Okay. So that upset me so much when people have these like trump cards that they're just waiting to play. So if the procedure would be perfectly safe and allow Data to, it'd be like, okay, I'm going to do some scans and then you're going to be good to go. It's like, okay, that's one thing. But when Data is able to, within like a minute, determine that Maddox just doesn't have enough information to like safely do this procedure, and he says no, and Picard is like, look, I am not going to submit one of my officers to a dangerous experiment, then Maddox plays that fucking trump card that made me so mad. He's like, well, I've already got the transfer order ready.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, wow.
I just wanted you to do it willingly.
Exactly.
Because I want everybody to like stroke my ego or something. I don't know.
Exactly. It was so weaselly and underhanded. The fact that you already had the transfer orders with you, like expecting that they weren't going to want to go along with this. Like that was really messy to me. I was like, good Lord, you are like possibly one of the most unlikable characters in Star Trek for me, along with like,
Remick.
Yeah.
Yep. Remick was the worst also. Yeah. He reminds me a lot of Remick, just that kind of like bull in a china shop. Which, fun fact, bulls in a china shop are incredibly delicate. But I'm talking about the metaphor.
Are they?
Yes, they are.
Really?
they don't break a single dish. they tested this on Mythbusters.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Not a single piece of china was broken with bulls running rampant. But anyway,
I was just about to wonder how you knew that with such certainty.
It's one of those idioms that's 100% false. But anyways, so I hate the fact that Maddox refers to Data as it. I think that's incredibly rude.
Isn't that so grating?
And it kind of reminds me of Pulaski calling him Data, but it's worse because at least Pulaski talks to Data sometimes. I mean, sometimes she talks right past him like he doesn't exist.
Yes.
But Maddox was making a concerted effort. Every time Data asked a question, he would kind of glance at Data and then talk to Picard or talk to Riker.
Yes.
Like he wouldn't talk to Data directly, as if Data he wasn't even worth enough to have a conversation with him face to face, which was like so freaking rude.
That to me was made my skin crawl. So we quickly have this like really deep moment that for me was like, it just tugged at my heartstrings so hard. So Data comes to the captain in his ready room and says he will not submit to this experiment. And Picard says he understands that. And he's like, I'm also trying to be fair and kind of look at it Starfleet's point of view. And then Data gets right to the heart of the matter. And he says, Geordi's eyes are far superior to human eyes, so why aren't all human officers required to have their eyes replaced with cybernetic implants like the visor? And Picard just kind of like
has no answer.
Yes. And I just thought, oh my God, Data, that was whoever wrote that line really like cuts right to the heart of all of us. Like, if Geordi's visor is best, why aren't we all required to lose our eyes to have a visor like that?
Right. Because we're talking about the greater good. So if it's really about the greater good, then we should be able to modify everyone, not just Data.
Yes.
And it's like, and then he just is like, and and again, he can't read tells and poker yet, but he totally read Picard, right? Because he was just like, I understand. It's because I'm artificial that's okay to do to me. And then it just walks out and you're just like, oof.
Yes. And Picard, that just kicks Picard's ass into overdrive. I love that he's like, computer, I want all laws and regulations about transfers. I want like, give me anything. And then
do you notice how his like screen swivels 360?
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, remember they didn't have laptops in 1988. Like
nope.
That was not a thing. So for them to have this screen that swivels 360 that they can like talk to, they didn't have voice command was not really a thing. I just love that. That was just a little piece of technology where I was like, ooh.
Yes. And cool. he really means business when he swivels his laptop.
Swiveling is serious. That's always true.
Well, this is how serious he is. He's willing to put his pride aside and visit his old girlfriend, Captain Louvois, who cannot get enough of the fact that Picard came to her for help. And she's gloating. And I just wrote in my notes in all caps, read the room, lady. Obviously upset and coming to you for help. And he's not flirting and playing. Like, I've had adversarial flirtatious relationships with like people in my past. And it's like fun to be competitive, blah, blah, blah. But like, give me a break. Like, he's very clearly upset. He's coming to you for help and you just won't stop like gloating. And I love that he just kind of slaps her down for her hubris, you know, and he storms out on her and she's like, ah, damn it. It's like, yeah, dude, you shouldn't have. This person is like, I need you to help me. And she's like, well. No. Not the time for that.
Yep, it's true. And she's still like being flirtatious and he's clearly not. And he's even saying like, of course I came to you. You're the only person here. I had to come to you. Would have gone to anyone else if I could have gone to them.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just like, how much more clear can I make it that this is not the time nor the place?
Yes.
For that conversation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that sort of just seemed to like seal his disdain for her. Like he went, I feel like that was the end of Picard potentially flirting with Captain Louvois. Like, that's it. Like, you just killed it. You overplayed that hand. And like, you were just relishing this, like, this man has come to me.
Right.
You know, and
really
she's
serious moment.
Yes. And she's doing the, like, how the tables have turned kind of dance. And he's like, will you shut the fuck up? Because I'm trying to get some questions answered that are very serious. And she's like, this moment is so delicious. Like, no, that's it. Stop. Yep. I'm done with you.
Yep. So then we go to Data's room, and Data's now packing up his tiny little suitcase, which is the size of a lunchbox. And I was like, what on earth is the function of, because we've talked about this before, like when Wesley went to train to try to get into the academy, how he didn't take any luggage and how like nobody ever takes luggage except for Lwaxana Troi. No one else ever takes luggage. And so you're kind of like, well, I mean, they can replicate anything they need, I guess. But now Data's actually taking luggage, and it's like the tiniest little suitcase in history. It's so adorable. And I'm like, what really is he going to put in that?
You know, I'm so curious. Yeah, you're right. Number one, you're absolutely right. Like, it's like you're basically putting enough contents to fill like a Ziploc freezer gallon bag. Like, it's really small.
Exactly.
It's really small. But my other thought was, where can I get my hands on one of those kick-ass like suitcase cylinder things? They're so cool.
They're pretty cute.
I totally want to make one, but I don't know how.
Yep. So, that's the story of our lives, guys. Yeah. We love like arts and crafts and cosplay and stuff. And we're always like, ooh, how do I do that?
Yes.
Foam ?
Yeah. That's my first thought. It's always like
foam.
Foam.
And then you're like, how do I do the hinges? Exactly. Yep. Exactly. And the color is so pretty.
Yeah.
So he's packing this tiny little lunchbox sized suitcase. And you know, it's so a couple thoughts on this scene. I love that he takes the Yar hologram. Like, that just like, oh, just is so sweet in my heart, because they had a little special thing going on back in episode 2 of season 1.
Yep.
They hooked up because they both got drunk from a virus. And so
correction, they got space drunk and
they got space drunk and hooked up. Yes. Thank you for that correction. They got space drunk and hooked up. And so afterwards, Yar was just like, that never happened. We will never discuss it. And so it's been a secret, but Data's like always had a special place in his cybernetic heart for Yar. And so I love that he took Yar's hologram. And also I was thinking, how did they do this? Because they didn't have holograms in the 80s like they do now. Like, you can actually create a hologram now.
Well,
so
I mean, just CGI, I guess. I don't know. I imagine they just in post production, just CGI'd in her little.
I don't understand the technology, but it looks so cool. Like, it legit looks like a hologram.
I was really waiting for her to be like, Worf, you are the best, or whatever.
Best. Yeah. Yeah,
although
totally.
That's a mashup of Worf and Riker's, but still, I thought to myself though, like, wouldn't she say something? Wouldn't the little hologram be like, Data, blah, blah, blah? But I guess she's just standing there and he can look at her. Whatever.
It's like Harry Potter. It's just the picture that moves.
Yeah, that's true. It
doesn't really talk or make sounds yet.
But so then Maddox.
Oh, wait, but before he comes in, last thing that I love about the scene before he comes in, because I didn't love that. So Data's got these drawers in the wall. How cool is that?
I know.
I want drawers in the wall. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. I just thought that was really cool. That's like so space efficient.
See, I have noticed the drawers in the quarters as long as I can remember. And especially that there's one drawer that's just a fucking water basin. It's just like a sink that has water in it that you can splash on your face. I was like, what? There's a drawer of water in the wall. That's so weird and so cool. Your filtration system must be amazing because that space would be so effing mildewy. But whatever.
No, I mean, the ship is all about recycling, right? I think everything on that ship is super filtered.
I guess, but I was like, this is crazy. Like, yeah, I do love those drawers. Okay, so then this moment that made my skin crawl, and I really, okay. Rudeness and lack of consideration for others is one of my biggest pet peeves when people are inconsiderate of others. Like, it just makes me irrationally angry. It just makes me so frustrated when others will just steamroll over somebody without the slightest care. And this moment, Maddox just wanders on into Data's quarters without even like ringing the doorbell and just starts rifling through his shit. Like, what are you thinking going into somebody's quarters? I mean, clearly he doesn't think that Data's a person, but you've got to be kidding me. Just wandering around like that and just going through his stuff. Like, and Data, I love that when Data happens to walk back in the room and sees him there, he says, like, isn't it customary for you to ask somebody's permission before you come in? And then Maddox is just a total dick and like steamrolls right past that. He does open up a book of Shakespearean sonnets. And I did a little deep dive on the lines that Maddox reads. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state. Those are the opening lines of Shakespeare's Sonnet 29, which is all about toying with the differences between spiritual wealth and economic wealth. And when the sonnet opens, the speaker has lost all hope and feels like God does not care about him. And I thought that was like such a lovely little, just like a little bit of layering in this scene where like Data is very much at this man's mercy and if he had feelings, might feel like he doesn't matter to
anyone. It might feel super hopeless. Like, who knows what dark paths he would wander down if he were a human in a similar position where he was being forced to really like be murdered, be destroyed so that someone else could learn. So so Maddox is reading Data's book, which, what the heck, dude? I was thinking, I put in my notes, this is why these doors need locks. This moment right here.
Yep.
And then I also thought to myself, Data, whatever you do, don't tell Maddox about your off switch. That's another thing I was thinking in that scene. I was like, don't tell him. He's not going to use that information for good.
Yeah, well, you know, Data is one to be like, so I really don't want to mention this, but I have an off switch. He said that to like,
and here it is.
Yeah. He has said that to so many people. It's not something I really want to talk about, or I don't want anybody to know about it, but here's my off switch. Like,
it's right here. You just push it. Yeah. But that's part of his charm.
So Maddox is threatening Data and he's like, look, one or the other, you are reporting to me tomorrow. And Data, I love how Data can deal these like devastating blows to people, but do it with like no emotion because, you know, he's an android. So he says, no, I will not. I've already resigned from Starfleet. So we've got this like hammer drop moment. And Maddox is being such a dick about it. Picard says, as a Starfleet officer, Data has certain rights. And Maddox has this whole spiel where it's me. He says, I'm so sick about talking about rights. What about my rights to have my life's work completed? No. I would slap him down like the hack that he is.
Seriously, that's not a right.
That's not a right.
We're talking about human rights, not like desires and whims. That is a totally different thing.
Exactly. Do not confuse a basic human right with a wish. Don't confuse those two. Dude, get the fuck out of here with this.
Yeah.
Like, that was the
it was really, really ridiculous the way he's stepping on Data's right to choose to not be destroyed. This is the right of life, the right to exist.
Yes.
And comparing that with his right to do his quote unquote life's work, that is your occupation, sir. That has nothing to do with your right to exist, your right to live. Like, these are not comparable. You don't need to destroy Data to study because you haven't destroyed him so far. And you're still not where Dr. Soong was. So you still got some time to go. Like,
yes. And this dude is like 32. So talk about a life's work. Like, you've been working on this for like maybe 12 years.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Or whenever Data was discovered, actually, because he was working on cybernetics before Data was discovered. And then once Data was discovered, all his research became focused on Data alone.
Oh,
like, he's the expert on Data. as far as he can be compared to Dr. Sung. So it's like your life's work. First of all, it's not even your life's work, buddy. It's Dr. Sung's work.
Yep.
First of all.
Yeah.
So,
that's all science is you're really just taking any and all background information that's already been studied and discovered about a subject, and then you further your understanding and knowledge, and
then you pass the baton. That's
exactly,
how it goes.
Exactly. You're absolutely right about that. Can we talk about the scene where Data is unwrapping presents at his little goodbye party? Oh my God. That was
so Data has a goodbye party to say goodbye to the Enterprise because he is peacing out, and it's awful because he loves Starfleet and he wants to be on the ship, but he is not going to submit himself to be destroyed for no good reason or just, for the furtherance of knowledge. And I love the speech he gives too to Maddox about like something, beautiful will be lost, and it's not ego. It's just like a complete objective assessment of what Sung has created in me. Yeah. And that I can't allow that to just be lost. So he has this goodbye party, and he's like being so delicate with unwrapping his present. And he's explaining to Wesley why, if I'm quite careful, you can reuse the paper again.
Oh my gosh. That for me was my childhood all over. It was my mom opening presents and like saving every scrap of paper. And my mom legit will still wrap Christmas presents like this year with wrapping paper that's like 8 or 10 years old that she's just like, save. Just throw it out. And I love when Data realizes that everybody's kind of like waiting for him to rip the paper. He just kind of like tears it out.
He just tears it in half and puts it down.
That was so fun. And I love the laughter. I felt like that might have been the actors genuinely breaking because they kind of start laughing and then they kind of bury their faces. And I thought that was a very cute moment. And then we immediately go to this like bittersweet moment where Geordi is like sad to lose his friend. And it really shows the development that these two characters have undergone together. Like this, they've had a little journey in these 2 short seasons. Or season and a quarter or whatever, that like enough so that Geordi is sad to have him lose his friend.
And I really like that they did this scene too. I'm thinking about this just now as an audience member, because if Data did leave Starfleet, it would be really sad. And I think a lot of us as viewers, as, fans would be really upset. And then, Geordi's kind of playing out those part of the emotions. Like the other people are like, okay, let's have a goodbye party and let's send you off in style. But somebody should be sad. Like this is a sad thing. And so I think Geordi just voices like our thoughts as viewers of like, this is a bunch of crap, right? Because he's just like, I'm sad that you're leaving. And Data's like, well, I'm sad, I'm sad too. I don't want to leave. And he's just like, it's not the fact that you're leaving though. It's the fact how you're leaving. Like you're being forced out. And that's just not fair. It's not right. And there's just like nothing we can do about it. So yeah, that scene was really sweet.
It was very sweet. And I thought that it was necessary for us to have a little bit of that sort of goodbye between Geordi and Data. But really, I think that the like meat of this episode doesn't really kick off until kind of this moment where the captain goes to challenge the current precedent. So Picard challenges the current precedent. And so Captain
because they were like, okay, he's going to resign and he's going to leave and that's it. But then Maddox goes to Lavoie and says like, no, he's property. He's property of Starfleet. He cannot resign. We're going to force him to stay. He's not allowed to resign. He's not allowed to leave. He's not allowed to say no to my experiments. Like I can do whatever I want with him.
Yes.
And so she goes to look. So she goes to look into the law. Picard's like, look it up. And she goes to look into the law and she goes, yeah, you know what? I think he is property, which means, yeah, he can't resign and he has to submit to all of this. And Picard's just like, what else can we do?
Yes.
Is there any other option? And Lavoie's like, there's always another option. Can appeal it. And so he's like, that's it. We're appealing it then.
Which I had some question / disbelief about the system because Captain Picard is going to be Data's defendant. And Captain Lavoie says that makes Riker as the second most senior crew member to be the litigator. And I thought, what kind of system is that? Riker clearly does not believe that Data is just property of Starfleet. And Maddox already believes that. So shouldn't Maddox be the litigator and argue that case? Like that to me didn't make any sense.
what she was like, they would have had a court if they had a court, but they're out in the middle of nowhere. And so she's the highest authority as a JAG officer. She's now not just the lawyer, but she's a judge. So that was kind of like, okay, I didn't know you could do that, but okay. Lawyers could be the judge suddenly without having to go through a process. I guess that's what she's there for. And because they're in a star base, they don't have a ton of officers. I guess they have a ton of like just civilians, or who was on a star base exactly, I don't know. But somehow Picard's like the only other captain.
Yes.
And the admiral must be long gone. Right? Because he would be the highest one.
Yes, by the way, wait a second, you're right. He should have been. Like, there's a fucking admiral.
He must have dropped off Maddox and then just pieced out. And Maddox's ship must be far away. I don't know. So the only two captains, as far as we know, are Lavoie and Picard. They're the only two captains, but Lavoie is the judge, so she can't be in charge. And then I guess even though Maddox is a commander, he's not as high ranked as Riker or whatever. I don't know.
I guess not. I just thought it was weird to have somebody who very vehemently does not believe in a certain stance to make them argue that stance. And Riker is obviously, I mean, he makes a good point where he's like, no, I don't believe that. Like, Data is a person and he deserves those rights. Mm-hmm. And then Captain Lavoie says, okay, if you do not argue this stand, I am going to
keep my original ruling.
Yes, and she says Data is a toaster. He does not have any rights. And I thought, do they have toasters in the 24th century? That doesn't seem, with replicators, why would you need to be cooking bread in a toaster? Like, that just seemed to me like
with open flames out in space.
Yes. I was like, how would you even know what a toaster is?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So yeah, so we have the situation where we need two high-ranking officers. Riker gets picked. Riker's like, I don't believe in any of this. And she's like, well, if you won't go with the appeal process, then it won't be appealed. We'll just stick with my original ruling. And they're like, fine, then appeal, then we'll do it. And this puts Riker in such a challenging position, and Picard as well.
Yes.
And so in the next scene, we see Picard talking to Data about what just happened and telling him like, hey, they've ruled that you are property and that you have to submit to all this. And Data's just like, I see. Let's hope that Commander Maddox is more skilled than he seems. Because like he's just like, he's not skilled enough to put me back together, but okay, let's just hope for the best. And Picard's just like, Data, we are not letting you submit to that. We're going to fight this. Like, we're just not just going to obey orders. He's like, oh, okay.
Well, see, I thought that Captain Picard kind of drew that moment out for some drama. Like it's like you come into a relationship and you go, I've got some terrible news from the doctor. He got a parking ticket. It's like, you could have said that like a little bit earlier, because he's like, Data, Starfleet has ruled that you are property and must submit. And it's only when Data's like, okie dokie. And he's like, Data, sit down. You're not going anywhere. It's like, but you just led him to believe that, okay, Picard, there might have been a better way to say that.
He needed less pauses between those sentences.
Yeah. A pause big enough to drive a bus through is maybe not the kind of pause that you need in this moment. So they do end up doing the appeals process, and Riker does a hell of a job at demonstrating that Data is just a machine. I mean, he like really went for it. He flipped Data's off switch, because Data's been like trumpeting around like, I don't want anybody to know about this, but he
found it though. I did think about that. I was like, why did he tell Riker? But no, he found it in the schematics, because remember when he was looking at the schematics, and then he found this one spot in Data's back that was glowing red, and then he smiled. He was like, aha. And then immediately after he smiled, he frowned like, ugh, because he didn't want to win the case.
Yes.
But Lavoie said if he did not prosecute this case to his best, like if she had any sense that he was pulling punches and not doing his best, she was going to stop the trial immediately and rule against Data.
Yes.
But she did not want any funny business. She wanted it to be a real trial.
Yes.
And so he found the off switch in the schematics. And then I thought to myself, that should not be in the schematics. We need to do some security updates and go ahead and take that off of all images. You know how they do that with like banks or whatever, at least on movies? They like hide some parts of the blueprints.
Yeah, just redact that part of the blueprint.
That needs to be redacted. The off switch needs to be redacted. But yes. So he goes and turns him off, and he does a great job like showing that Data's a machine, and Data even admits he's a machine after his first question.
Yes. Well, he says, you are a machine created by man, and now man will turn off the machine. And he flips the off switch and puts Data, turns Data off. And then he says, Pinocchio's strings have been cut or whatever. And I was like, that's maybe just a tad more dramatic.
I don't know if that was necessary.
Yeah, that was probably not super necessary. But he basically owns Picard. And I love, Picard goes to the one counselor who can give him the kind of counsel he wants. And it's not the ship's counselor, it's the ship's counselor, Guinan.
Right. I don't think that Troy's even in this entire episode.
Oh, probably not. No. She is in there because she's laughing along with Riker when Data rips up the wrapping paper.
Oh, okay.
But that's it. Yeah, you're right. I don't even know if she has a line. Well, if we can't remember, that means she's not enough of a presence. But he does go to Guinan, who talks about, as Guinan does, she kind of does, as our guest Chris French mentioned, like, what do you think you should do? Because she does say, like, wow, a whole fleet of Datas. Like, just think how that will change command. You no longer have to worry about
doing the dirty work or doing anything dangerous.
Exactly. Like, look at what happened to Jack Crusher, essentially. Like, you sent him to his death by having him do his job. But with a fleet of Data, it's like, if they're destroyed, like, it doesn't matter. You have more and more and more. And I love that she lets Picard realize that she's talking about slavery and disposable people. And she doesn't outwardly say it. And I was like, oh God, this is Guinan at her best. She gets you where you need to be, but she does not push you. She just sort of like, she just guides
you. She lets you find it yourself. Yeah, she's a perfect guide. Absolutely. And she talks about, this whole scene is just so wonderful. And she talks about how his value, right? She talks about his value and like, oh, he's very valuable to you. Wouldn't he be even more valuable as, a blueprint for other Datas? And then how valuable would they be? And she's making it very clear that, like, we're not talking about value. Like, I appreciate Data. At this point, we're talking about like monetary value. We're talking about like as a possession, like how much is he worth? We're trading and selling, and I just think this scene was really good. And Picard realizes like, oh, the point is not at all about just learning and furthering mankind and creating more Data. It's like, this is a bigger issue that none of us have been seeing, or we've all been seeing and ignoring, right? Because he says we've been dancing around the most important issue, which is, creating a whole race of beings that are disposable.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And she does really get to such a beautiful part where I feel like that Sonnet 29 kind of comes back, because we're really dealing with like the appreciation of Data as an art form and not his economic value.
Right.
Starfleet. So in that Sonnet 29, it's the speaker is toying with that difference between like his spiritual wealth and his economic wealth. And I was like, oh man, the writers did such a beautiful job of like overlaying all of these themes like over each other. So
it's beautiful. And then when Picard's like, wait, we're talking about slavery, Guinan goes, well, that's a bit extreme. And then he's like, no, it's not. You're right. Even that, she kind of downplays it so that he can really, she's not forcing it on him. She's just, again, guiding him. And he's like, wait a minute. Which is very cool.
I mean, if we could all be Guinan for a day, just think of how much change we could enact for good. She's
seriously.
She's written so beautifully. So this really illuminates Picard's ideas. And he goes in and he's just the Picard that we love. He does not deny that Data is a machine. He doesn't deny that Data was created by a man, but he says all of those things are irrelevant because we as humans are machines, but of a biochemical makeup instead of just like electrical. And it doesn't matter if he was created by a man. Like, children are the offspring of like a mashup of DNA of their parents. Like, so those things don't matter. What matters is whether he is property, and whether he's property depends on his sentience. And I love when he calls Maddox as a hostile witness and just owns him. Data meets all the requirements of sentience. He's intelligent. He's self-aware. He's conscious. And in that moment, when Picard opens up Data's little lunchbox and pulls out, like, why would you take Tasha Yar's little hologram? Why would you take this book? And I love that Data's like, I don't know, just because they're meaningful to me. Like, that's not how a ship's computer would speak. And then Picard's like coup de grace is when when he mentions that one Data's a curiosity, maybe even a wonder, but 100 or 1,000, now you're creating a race of people. And don't we have to be very careful about like creating races and
how we treat those races?
Yes. Aren't we going to be judged in the future of how we treat those races? Like, oh, that was like game over. It was so good.
It was so good. And the whole time I just wanted to punch Maddox's little smug face. Just like, oh, stupid face. Like he just had this like, but then when he was up there as the hostile witness, it was like really satisfying because he couldn't answer any of these questions. For some reason, you're just anti-Data. And he asked him that question, like, do you like Data? Do you even like him? Because you're just seem like you're out to get him. He didn't say that part. That was implied. Right. And Maddox didn't respond. He just said, well, he's a technological marvel. Then he turns the tables. Picard asks Maddox that last question, but then turns and asks Riker, and then turns and asks Lavoie. And they're just all kind of like, right, like how would we treat another race? Like we're right now determining this entire race we're thinking of creating, and that they're lesser than us, and that they're property, and that we can trade and sell them. Like that's not okay. That's not what we're about.
Absolutely. And she rules that Data has the freedom to choose his path, and that he's not the property of Starfleet. And in doing so, she sets that new precedent. And I thought, I mean, we knew that it was going to get to that, because knowing as the season progresses, like he obviously doesn't go with Maddox, but I could not remember like why she ruled that way until I watched this, and I was like, oh yeah, because really Riker did such a great job. I was like, oh shit, there's no way they're going to get out of this now. And we know they get out of it, but I was like, oh, but how? So Picard, because of Guinan's like excellent counsel, thank you Guinan yet again, saving the day, like has basically saved Data.
Yeah. And I love how he turns to her and he's just like, you wanted to make some good laws, right? You want to make laws, make this a good one. This law is going to be echoed throughout history. Like whatever you decide right now is what's going to carry forward for any type of artificial intelligence created in Starfleet from this moment. That's a really big deal. And that's what Lavoie wanted. She wanted to make an impact on society with her lawmaking. And this is like, it just fell into her lap, this thing she never could have guessed.
That is super neat and a very interesting concept about, you know, I love that, as you mentioned before, anytime there's AI in a story, it's always evil and it's always out to get everybody, and everything starts off well, and then the AI very quickly understands that humans are not worth saving or something like that, and then they just start killing them all. And I love that Data, it's like we love him and trust him because we know he has an exemplary record, and that's not like in his programming to like hurt others. So that is pretty cool. And I love, like, I can't wait till we talk about the brothers episode when Lore gives him the anger chip.
Yeah, the chip
he does become a very different and dangerous android.
Yeah, and even that, like even that, like the fact that Lore is like the other side of the coin of Data, right? Is that again, it shows that these androids that Dr. Soong made have the ability to make choices just like a human. They're not like, oh, because they're robots, they're evil. Oh, because they're robots, they're good. It's just like they both have choices, and Data chooses to do what's right and good and valiant, and Lore chooses to be a crazy psychopath.
Yeah. All right. So I think we've done it with this episode. Do you have any final thoughts before we go on for next week's?
I think we're good. I hope you guys loved, if you're listening, I hope you loved this episode as much as I love this episode, because this was like a breath of fresh air, especially after an episode like the outrageous Okana that we had earlier this season, which was
a breath of stale, stinky air. Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, next week, we're talking about season 2, episode 10 already, entitled The Dauphin. We will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.